Now, the government says he's banned from the UK, but Geert Wilders has told More 4 News he's coming anyway. The Dutch MP boards the plane to the UK tomorrow, despite the Home Office saying he's not welcome. He's been invited to the House of Lords to show his controversial film, which describes the Quran as a fascist book. And the government fears his views may endanger public security in the UK. So, is this freedom of speech or incitement to racial hatred? From The Hague, Andrew Thomas reports.
The film is deliberately provocative. Pages of the Quran turn. Highly selective inflammatory passages are taken out of context and intercut with footage of terrorist atrocities. There's no subtlety to the filmmaker's message. Islam, he's claiming, is a violent religion directly responsible for the most atrocious acts of our time. This is the film that will be seen by peers tomorrow. The plan had been for its maker to introduce it. But Geert Wilders has been banned. A last-minute letter from the Home Office telling the Dutch MP that for reasons of community harmony and public security, he would not be allowed into Britain. So with Wilders unable to come to Britain, we headed to Holland.
This is already causing a diplomatic row. Mr Wilders is every bit as controversial in Holland as he is in the UK, but that hasn't stopped the Dutch government complaining to ours. Mr Wilders, what's your reaction to the ban, to the letter?
Well, it's incredible. I thought that the times of Chamberlain in England were in the past, the times of appeasement, that somebody who is using his freedom of speech and was invited by a member of parliament from the United Kingdom would be welcome. As I was welcome in the United Kingdom before, not only to show fitment, to have a discussion with people who agree with me, people who disagree with me, and that indeed the United Kingdom, one of our oldest democracies in the European Union, is throwing the freedom of speech away.
But you'll understand the concerns of the British government. You, and your views rather, represent a threat to the harmony of the UK. They have the right under EU law to deny entry to you. All they're doing is exercising that law as legitimately as they can.
No, it's complete nonsense, and it shows how cowardless the British government really is, because I'm not a threat to anybody. I have my views. I haven't committed any crime anywhere in the world.
You're not a threat, but your views are a threat, because they're an incitement.
How can views be a threat?
Incitement to hatred.
No, which is totally nonsense. I'm not inciting any hatred. I have nothing against Muslims, but I have a problem, indeed, with the Islamization of our Western societies. Like a lot of people in the United Kingdom feel that the influx of Islam is not going for the better. And whether, even if you disagree with my point of view, still, in a democracy, in a rule of law, in a civil society, a member of parliament, an elected official, should be able to have discussions in parliament when invited by a parliament of another country.
You say your film isn't incitement to hatred, but it directly takes parts of the Quran and links them to some of the worst atrocities of our time, and indeed shows a cause and effect. Yeah. That surely is incitement to hatred. It's
No, I don't know whether you're a judge or not, but once again, it's not incitement of hatred. Extreme Muslims made the movie Fitna themselves. I didn't use any actors. I used certain verses from certain surahs from the Quran, and I used real images that occurred in the world, unfortunately. So
that's quite a stretch to say that Muslims made the film. You made the film. You very selectively edited.
No, I didn't do it selectively. I showed reality by extreme Muslims who, with the Quran in their hand, made the worst atrocities ever.
It's nothing short of inflammatory. His own Prime Minister has said the only reason why he made that video was to cause offence. He's been prosecuted in his own country for inciting hatred. So, you know, why is he here?
But Geert Wilders is not put off. He says despite the ban, he's still going to travel to London tomorrow to test the British government's resolve. Andrew Thomas, More 4 News in The Hague.
Well, a little earlier I was joined by the Muslim Labour peer Lord Ahmed and Lady Cox, one of the peers who's invited Geert Wilders to the UK. And I asked Lord Ahmed why he thought it wasn't acceptable for Mr Wilders to come, as he hadn't been charged with racial hatred offences here.
He's been indicted because of European law for inciting racial hatred. And in this country, he will incite further because British National Party is already advertising him to be allowed into this country. There are many examples in Europe, because when Mr. Haider was actually elected in Austria, we did not give him any time whatsoever in Europe, and rightly so, because he was inciting hatred against Jewish people. And then whoever's elected and is inciting it, if I was inciting hatred against my Christian friends, and I think that it's right that other people should be putting some sort of restrictions on my movement.
That's a fair point, because, Lady Cox, there is legislation, very relatively recently enacted indeed in this country, that it is an offence to incite racial hatred. It is clear that this film that this man wants to show will, by most people's judgment, do exactly that.
I don't agree with that. Of course, I'm not into inciting hatred, but we also do have legislation which protects the freedom to be critical of other religions. People are very critical of Christianity. We must have the freedom to express concerns, to be critical. And there are realities of terrorism. We've had 7/7, we've had 9/11, we've had Moscow, Madrid, Glasgow. There are serious issues here which need to be discussed, and I would like to see them discussed by the Muslim community.
Sure. Well, let me take up that point. The 7/7, no, this is an important point. You raised 7/7. The 7/7 bombers did what they did because of British foreign policy. We know that. They said so in videos. They didn't do it because people were rocking around saying or making films about not liking Islam or that the Quran was fascist. That's the point.
Well, if Lady Cox and others want to have a debate on terrorism and those who were responsible for 7/7, I've got no problem with that. This man wants to ban my religion and my book that I believe in. I don't ask for anybody to ban. He does, because he's
House of Lords is bigger than that. The British people are bigger than this, surely.
Absolutely, but he's inciting hatred against people, and that's exactly the reason why his own country is charging him and why his appeal court has dismissed the earlier judgment, and they want to indict him for this offence. Now, I know that you're innocent until proven guilty, but when there are serious charges against you, you know, it is allowed for anyone to watch bad movies, but we parliamentarians don't do that in the House of Lords. It's a matter of taste. And if you really want to do, incite hatred, or you want to offend other communities, I wouldn't even dream of doing that to my fellow colleagues.
Presumably, Lady Cox, you think, and we've got traditions of centuries indeed, where we've forged this view, that we're frankly more robust. We can deal without legislation with this, can't we?
Countless people have died for the principle of freedom of speech. It's one of the most precious freedoms. And I'll just make two brief points. There are those in our society at the moment who want to use the freedoms of democracy to destroy that democracy. And part of those people, we know from the footage which is shown in that film, that do adhere to religious doctrines which they interpret as ways of inciting and justifying violence. Those are sensitive issues, but they need to be discussed, not censored. You will not create peace by keeping them below the ground. They need to be discussed in a civilised way, and all we're seeing is a parliamentarian wanting to come and share a film with other parliamentarians. To stop that?
That's all it is.
Freedom of speech, but not at my expense. Freedom of speech,
but not to restrict. You're getting to see the film. I'm not.
No. I'm not censoring the film. I'm just actually wanting this man to stay away because he's inciting the hatred. But just let me remind Baroness Cox and everybody else that 800,000 Muslims joined up to fight against the fascists from India.
Sure, I know that's a very good point, but you raised an interesting one in what you just said. Do you believe, therefore, it would be okay for him to send his film over on DVD, show it in the House of Lords, but not come himself? Is that okay?
Well, the film is already on the internet and people can view it. And if the parliamentarians wanted to really view it, they could do it at home. They're actually doing this to incite some sort of, well, I think it gives them a platform to launch some sort of a debate, whatever type they want. But, obviously we know the views of certain parliamentarians, and they've got the right to have them.
You're calling Lady Cox a stirrer. You wouldn't use that phrase as a noble peer, but that's what you're saying.
I think Lord Ormond is imputing motives to me which I do not have and which I robustly reject. I believe passionate in freedom of speech. First Amendments, I moved in the House of Lords for freedom of speech, and again, freedom to criticise religion, even to make jokes about religion. These are fundamental freedoms. People are rude enough about Christianity. Okay, I don't like it, but you have to accept it. That is democracy. Democracy must give the right to be critical, and in this case, we have to have the right to discuss complex and sensitive issues as parliamentarians, and to stop a parliamentarian coming is outrageous.
Lady Cox and Lord Ahmed talking to me a little earlier, and Andrew Thomas will be following Geert Wilders tomorrow in his attempts to defy the ban and get into Britain.